it was very important when this when this freedom and law dichotomy was set up. Every paradigm has a hidden or secret agenda. And what lies behind this freedom and law thing is Christian ethics. It's very important in Christian ethics, other than some fairly minor and screwball variants, to maintain the idea of human freedom. Because man cannot fall and be redeemed without the dimension of human freedom. And the dimension of human freedom is a precondition for guilt. Only the free can be guilty, because only the free are responsible for what they do. You know, after all, if the universe is a determinism, then you do what you do because you couldn't do anything else. And so to expect you to take responsibility for that is a little weird. So it was very important to establish the idea of human freedom. And all our political systems are built on various adumbrations of this concept of freedom. Habit and novelty is a shift slightly east on this issue. There's a lot less freedom in the habit and novelty equation, and there's a lot less responsibility. And responsibility, you know, Hui Po Yang, the 9th century Chinese alchemist, said worry is preposterous. Worry is preposterous. And then the exegesis explains that in order to worry, you have to know what's going on. If you don't know what's going on, worry is an absurd. I mean, it's like someone who knows nothing about automobiles worrying that their car may break down. It's immaterial. So, freedom is a very touchy subject, and I offer this in an exploratory manner. There are very respectable orthodox positions which would tell you that the creation of the ideal of human freedom and the way in which it has been enshrined and defended in Western political institutions is the crowning achievement of the civilization. The problem is, it has a curious relationship to two other important power concentrations: the community and the ego. You know, where does freedom lie in that spectrum? When we say, if you are a Jeffersonian Democrat, a materialist, a paid-up member of the Democratic Party, and you say you are free, you know, do you mean you are free to do whatever you want to do? Or do you mean you are free to participate in the general will of the community? This is not a closed issue. Over the centuries, the answer to that question has shifted. The 19th century, in America, based on the exposure to frontier hardship and that sort of thing, was much more about the freedom of the community to do what it wanted to do. In the 20th century, consumerism and the disappearing of frontiers and the rise of populations and the packing of populations very tightly freedom has tended to mean the right to gratify the whims of the ego. And this has led to a whole bunch of anti-communal attitudes and phenomena of struggle, consumerism, manufacture of useless and soon-to-be obsolete objects, people trapped in a rat race of media-propagated needs and low salary and, you know, the rat race. So, the thing from the very beginning that has always puzzled me when people talk about the future was there's a general agreement that it's going to be more collective. that, we talk in terms of the internet, we talk in terms of boundary dissolution, community, and yet the great metaphor for collectivism is now in ruins. Marxism, it's finished. And so there is no countervailing force to this freedom and law image at the moment. But I think that when community coalesces around the felt need to express community values, then the paradigm shift will be very close to happening. Now, when will that happen? Things will have to get a lot worse. Because you see, the paradox is that the people who can change the world, people like you and me, the upper 5% of the literate elites of the industrial democracies, we're the furthest away from the bad news. We're getting 3 squares and having a fine time. So somehow there has to be a sense of danger or impending chaos. And then we will, I hope, organize ourselves to get out of it. Change is in and of itself neither painful nor pleasurable. But, the Bob Dylan song that says, when you got nothing to lose. Well, a lot of people have nothing, and a few people have something. And I think it wouldn't hurt for everybody to lighten their ballast a little bit to float higher. So these ideas have a lot of implications. A paradigm touches everything, and it begins very deeply. But I think that my, fractal mathematics, chaos theory, complexity theory, my own stuff with the time wave, all of this is going to, in a sense, erase much of the mystery about the future. That the future is in a freedom and law system necessarily unknowable. Because if you knew the future, then this idea of freedom would fall under a shadow. But if you replace freedom with the idea of novelty, and see then that no matter how unique a situation is, it was somehow preceded, announced, anticipated by earlier situations, then the anxiety that is built in to the freedom and law formulation disappears. Because you see, with the acceptance of this idea of freedom comes the acceptance of an unknown future, when in fact a great deal of the future can be triangulated and known even with old-style mathematical and cognitive techniques. And when you toss in the new stuff, then we indeed have headlights on our vehicles, and it does throw a high beam into the future. Well, novelty replaces freedom in that freedom is this idea that anything is possible and that you create it. And novelty is the idea that sometimes interesting things are possible and you are more like the gifted recipient. It embeds you more. Freedom is a fairly alienating concept. This is what modern existentialism understood. That woman, can't remember her name, Margaret Greene, who wrote that book, Dreadful Freedom, talks about how, once you embrace freedom, a great deal of supportive structure fell away, which the existentialists embraced as a necessary confrontation with man's situation in the cosmos. But I think they were pessimistic. Sartre's ultimate formulation of all this was, he said, nature is mute. Well, nature is not mute. That's ridiculous. How could somebody get so tweaked around as to hold that position? I don't believe it. Nature is not mute. Nature is the available statement for deconstruction on the nature of being. If you don't believe that, then you're an existentialist and you believe that human freedom is the proper domain of becoming. But this has not led to very happy. I mean, I see that as a prologue to some kind of fascism. You know, the Nietzschean super will is in there someplace. But I think native peoples, aboriginals, if you could explain these two things, freedom and law, they're not going to get freedom and law. An Amazon tribe wouldn't have a clue. But if you talk about novelty and habit, this they understand. This is what life is to anybody who's paying attention. While freedom and law both are high-flown abstractions that come out of a very special philosophical agenda that by the time Hume and Locke and John Stuart Mill got to it, it was 2,000 years old.